Consistently. In fact, I heard a speech that you gave to a Catholic assembly just a few days ago.
The Knights of Columbus meeting in New York.
Where you said that this was an expression of a deeply held belief within you, the opposition to abortion on demand. Would you reiterate?
Well, let me say this, that this is a tremendously divisive issue. But I don't care what the polls say, and I am not going to change position based on the polls. I am strongly on the pro-life side, and I have shown that and demonstrated it by vetoing bill after bill that's been sent down largely to embarrass me. A lot of them are done simply for political reasons. There's one pending now where they're trying to embarrass the president before the campaign really gets joined. And for me, it is a matter of fundamental principle. And the more I think of it, the more convinced I become instead of going the other way on it. And it's a tragedy, 1.5 million abortions, and there's got to be a better way. And I think I know what it is. It's adoption, it's abstinence, it's the family teaching that young people, whether it's single parent or two parents, that it's wrong to engage in the practices that result in these horrible increase in abortions. And let me add one other thing. I used the example in that speech, and I'm sure it's accurate, that to get your ears pierced, if you're a 13-year-old girl, you have to have parental consent in some states. I know it was given to me as true in Pennsylvania. But to get an abortion, some suggest you shouldn't even have to consult the parents. I'm sorry. I just think that is wrong. I believe it's immoral. And so I will fight for what I believe.
You can't give an aspirin to another parent's child without being charged with battery if they don't like it, or bind a scratch. And yet, parents who have held the absolute responsibility for the medical care of their children for 300 years in this country have now lost control of their minors. A 13-year-old girl can have this procedure that she will remember for the rest of her life. It just isn't right. And that is not a political stance with you. That is a deeply held moral.
It is a deeply held conviction, and it's not going to change. And as I say, a president has to make a lot of decisions. Some of them may be popular, some may be unpopular. But I've found you can't make a decision based on popularity or on surveys. You simply can't do it. You got to say, here's what I'm for, and I'm going to stand for it. Here's what I'm against. I don't want to change the subject, but I go back to the war in the Gulf. Everyone says, you don't have the American people with you on this one. You don't have the Congress with you on it. And I had to lead and say, here's what we're going to have to do. Now here's what I'm going to do, and bring the people on board. And I feel the same way on these social issues.
Unfortunately, it would appear that you don't have your party with you entirely on this abortion issue. I mean, you're being nominated by Lynn Martin, who's a pro-abortionist.
But I think she's on there for other reasons, and I think that everybody in the... I'll be the first to admit, everybody in the Republican Party doesn't agree with me, and everybody in the Democratic Party doesn't agree with my opponent by a long shot. So, and I'm sure there's differences with me on a lot of other issues. But I'm going to continue to stand for what I believe.
I mentioned that I wanted to ask you about several values, what we would call basic values. I have an article here from the Los Angeles Times, May 20th, 1992, featuring a story by Governor Clinton's interaction with the gay community there in Los Angeles. The headline says, "I have a vision and you're part of it." Let me read it, and then I'd like you to comment on it. "The crowd was almost all men, many arm in arm. There were as many gay rainbow flags as American flags. And for the first time in the memory of activists, the presumptive nominee of a major political party openly appealed for homosexual support. What I came here today to tell you in simple terms is, I have a vision and you're part of it," Clinton said Monday night. "We're all part of the same community, and we'd better start behaving as if we were." For years, Democratic presidential candidates, including Clinton, have awkwardly courted homosexuals, struggling to win their support and money while trying not to get noticed by mainstream voters. But Clinton spoke for almost 25 minutes before a dozen cameras. He issued a 3-page position paper on homosexuality and the AIDS issue. In that paper was kind of an affirmative action program, as well as gays in the military and other things. What is your position on the activist homosexual community?
I am not for activism in this regard. The Bible is full of references to love and compassion, and that's fine. And that's an underlying value that I hope we all share. But there is no need to codify the rights, so-called gay rights. The law protects people against discrimination, as well it should. But I differ with what I heard read to me there, and I believe that we ought to, for example, there's a tough call that any commander-in-chief makes. A lot of suits going on now about gays in the military. I support the current policy. I support the recommendation of the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And I do it without maliciousness in my heart, but I simply don't believe it. I was asked the other day in a Reader's Digest interview, do you support gay marriages? I said, of course I don't support that concept. I support traditional family values, and the liberal media are trying to make that into a cliche. They're trying to use that against me in a way that to make it look like I'm dividing the country. But I'm sorry, I think the answer is try to be understanding, to try to be compassionate, but not to advocate those things that you just happen to feel are wrong for our society.
As far as homosexuals in the military, you have consistently opposed that.
And I support our policy, and our policy is to oppose it. And it's been thought out. I'm sure it's been prayed over. But it is the correct policy. And yet, as you know, we're under fire in some quarters for that policy. But I am supporting, because I think that's been and is the proper policy. You know, when I get on vacation, and I don't want to wring my hands about not having much of a one this summer, we go to a little town called Kennebunkport in Maine. And last year, and then again this fall, an organization called ACT UP came to that little town. And they disrupted the little town. They threw out condoms in that little town. They conducted themselves in what I view as offensive behavior in that little town. And I would simply say to those who are hurting in families and praying in families about this question of homosexuality, maybe a family member, these kinds of tactics are wrong, and I find them offensive. And I hope and I think we have the best record of any administration on getting to the bottom of AIDS, fighting on AIDS. But when I said much of AIDS can be prevented by behavior, and by that I was talking about sex behavior, and I was talking about anti-drug behavior, that group demonstrated saying, I'm the one that ought to change my behavior. Well, it's a free country, and I respect the right to protest, and I respect the right to free speech. But I am not going to change on this, because I think that these tactics weaken weaken their own cause, which I don't agree with, and also I find them offensive. And so, fine, let them do their thing, and I'll say my piece.
I'm really pleased to hear you say that, because I remember you condemned the tactics of Operation Rescue, and I thought at the time, come on, Mr. President, talk about the tactics of ACT UP while you're at it. I mean, they broke into St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City and just created havoc, broke the law.
Terribly offensive to I talked to Cardinal O'Connor just a few days ago in New York about this. I have condemned it before, and I'll continue to condemn it. I find it terribly offensive. The thing that I find most offensive, this is personal, this isn't governmental, is when a person's faith is undermined, a person's faith is abused and offended by someone else. I don't think that's right. Unrelated to this question, we go to a tiny little congregational church in the winter. When I'm in Maine, I belong to an Episcopal church in Texas, St. Martin's down there. But in that little church, Barbara and I are worshiping. There may be, 30 people there. It's grassroots, wonderful friends and neighbors from the Maine community there. And some person, knowing I was going to be in church, came up and started yelling at our pastor, and just to make some point. This one happened to be on the war. And it was terribly offensive, and I just think that it is wrong to violate someone else's right to worship as one wants.
And I agree with you that the Bible makes it very clear that we're to love everyone. We're all sinners. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. And there should be an expression of compassion and love for those that are, the way I would put it, is being caught in that homosexual way of life. But the activists have in mind an agenda that we feel would undermine the family and do great damage to the country. Are you aware that homosexual activists were invited to the White House by your administration?
I remember something about that. I don't have the details on it.
You are the first president to allow a group to come to the White House defined by their sexual activity. And that was very offensive to a lot of people.
I thought that was addressed as inadvertent, and I believe that's correct. And I don't know whether it was in relationship to another piece of legislation or what it was.
Yes.
But please let me say that nobody should glean from that a condonation of behavior that I don't agree with.
Mr. President, what do you want to say to our listeners? What message would you give as we approach this all-important election?
Listen, I don't think you have enough time on this marvelous program of yours to let me start unwinding on that. But maybe it ought to be this. Do not let the critics make you believe that in spite of the problems we've talked about here, that we're a nation in decline. We're a great nation. In many ways, we're the envy of the world, even with tough economic times. Our economy is greater and stronger than most of the Western European economies today. We are a country that can do what we set out to do. And we ought to, but now we've got to be sure we change the way we do it. And that's why I favor choice in child care. That's why I favor parental choice in education. That's why I favor getting these problems solved as much as possible at the family, the local, the community, and the state level. And do not despair about America. We are not in decline. We simply need to take and change things for the better. So stay involved and practice participation in helping others. You know, I call it points of light, but it is the age-old concept that de Tocqueville found when he came to this country of one American helping another. And we're a generous country. We're a friendly country. We're fair and honorable and decent, and I don't like to see our country torn down. I don't like to see it ripped asunder by some of these cultural values. I don't like to see our kids inflicted with some of the most insidious rap songs or whatever it is, and I think we got to get together as a nation, pull together, recognize our decency, and then fight for it.
Are you aware that millions of parents in this country are terrified right now about what's happening to the culture and especially the influences that are on their kids?
Yes, they are, and I think that they ought to involve themselves in the political process. Are they all going to go out there and roll up their sleeves and do what Americans have the right to do? Demand of the people that they vote for, regardless of party, that they stand with them on what we call traditional family values. And I can take the heat. I don't care if some liberal editor ridicules me for what I believe, but I need help. I need legions of people to get in this electoral process and say, we're not going to take it anymore. And if they have something that's as offensive as adulating and worshiping in a label that suggests the killing of a police officer, for heaven's sakes, stand up against it. Change it.
That really
do something about it. These
It's
people are laying their life on the line for us every day in the cities and in rural America, these police officers. And to have some record, tape come out that almost advocates the killing of a police officer, I'm sorry, that goes beyond the grounds of any decency and honor. But it's got to be changed, given our system of law, by the people. The people have to make these changes.
I think there is an awakening that's occurring. I can't let you leave, Mr. President, without talking about the GI Bill for children that your administration is supporting. Explain it very quickly, and especially with reference to the individual choice by the parent as to which school a child would be able to go to.
let me put this one, frame it for you. When I got out of the Navy in 1945, I was 20, maybe 21, and the war had just ended, World War II. The GI Bill was passed. That GI Bill gave to me a certain amount of money to go to the college of my choice. The government didn't say, you got to go to a state university. They said you can go to the college of your choice, parochial, private, public, whatever. My principle,
you could go to a religious school. And there was no church-state
no
confusion.
Church-state confusion. Nobody raised the constitutional argument. Nobody said this is wrong. And what happened was all institutions benefited by that program. I believe the state institutions, the private, the religious, all were chosen by some, and I think it helped. I know it helped the young people that benefited from that. Shift the gear to now. I believe that parents should have the choice or have an assistance in getting to accomplish that choice in public schools. If they want to choose it, benefit that one by a voucher, but also private and religious schools. Same principle we have for child care, really, that the parents know best, the parents can choose, or the kids, in this case, would benefit. And I have a big difference with my opponent on this. He says he's for choice, but he wants to rule out private and religious schools. And I think a time has come to say, look, our educational system isn't measuring up. Let's try the GI Bill for kids that says we're going to give parents a voucher and let them choose. And Dr. Dobson, I am convinced that one beneficiary of this will be the public schools, because it's been shown in Rochester and other places where it's been tried just on public schools that the school not chosen betters itself. So I will take on the powerful unions on this.
And the NEA, National Education Association,
I will go after
they're fighting you tooth and nail.
They're fighting me tooth and nail, but they can get in line. A lot of other special interests are fighting me. And I've now got to say to the American people, I need your help to do something that's different, but something that is right. Let the parents, let the families choose. And it does not violate our constitutional separation of church and state.
$500 million in that bill.
$500 million.
$1,000 per family, per child, right?
It does, and it's only a demonstration program, but it doesn't have, it's means tested beyond 40,000, but people into that range will have a shot at it, and we need to try it. And if it works, and I'm sure it will, then we restructure the whole educational system in this country.
Would it include homeschools?
Yes, it does. I think it has a provision that tries that. I think there are some restrictions so you don't go into crackpot. You know, there's some crackpots out there.
Really?
Homeschools are good. Yeah, you probably haven't run into it. But there are people that just rip off the government, and I do think there has to be some recognition that you don't want to just start up a little mill out there to glean $1,000 from the taxpayer.
How can people pray for you, regardless of the political persuasion? And Focus on the Family is a nonprofit organization that does not support political candidates through the ministry itself. But I know that people out there pray for our leaders. And how can they pray for you?
I would simply ask the prayers of people, not in a partisan sense, maybe not even in winning an election that I think has a lot to do about the direction of our country, but the president as president. Lincoln went to his knees a lot in that wonderful White House in which I'm privileged to live. And I understand that better now, because I don't believe that an atheist could be president of the United States. Mm-hmm. I don't honestly believe in my heart that if a person didn't have faith and didn't get strength from a supreme being, that person could serve as president. And so I would simply invite the prayers for the president of this country, and then I'll sort of out all the politics and go through the long political campaign. But we're a very special country. We're a very stable country. Our values, our national values are sound. And so I would pray for the president as president and hope that he can profit by the strength that God gives us. And that's all I'd ask.
Mr. President, thank you for being our guest here at Focus on the Family, for coming by, and our prayers will be with you. And I trust that God will go with you and keep you and Governor Clinton safe, especially from here to November.
Well, I believe in prayer, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
And there you have almost all of the conversation with the President of the United States, George Bush. If you joined us late, he was in our studios almost 1 week ago on Thursday, August 6th. And Dr. Dobson had an opportunity to just sit one-on-one with him and talk about those issues that we've discussed for a number of months and years here on the broadcast that impact families.
It was not part of the interview, but I think it is interesting in the context of that particular war. How long is it? Just
it's a little over a minute, and you'll hear the photographers clicking their cameras in the
they
background.
closed in on us
Yes.
when the interview was over.
But I think people will find it very insightful.
From a distance, it appeared during the Gulf War that you were very moved emotionally to
Very.
have to send those men into battle.
Oh.
And then your own illness occurred fairly close to that in time frame, didn't it?
I don't think there was any connection. I mean,
No, I didn't
medically,
mean that, but I
think
mean the
there was-
time frame, the
Yeah.
emotional impact of those two things was fairly close together, as I recall.
Well, the emotional impact of the first was much greater than the second because it really did. I sat up there with tears streaming down my face at Camp David the day before I knew these kids were gonna start the air war. You know, you have to feel a responsibility. It's somebody else's son, somebody else's daughter that's going to be in harm's way, one way or another, in this modern Army and Navy and Marines, et cetera, of ours. And it was. I remember being in our little chapel at Camp David, and I was very moved by it emotionally, and it drains it. And then we'd hear his letter. I mean, the first Navy pilot shot down. His wife was so heroic, and our children knew their dad did the right thing. The guy was killed. I mean, all those things I took very personally.
You couldn't help but do it. You gave the order.
Yeah.
And yet more would have died if you
Now
hadn't
we
done
hear
it.
all this macho talk out there from people that I looked over my shoulder looking, where are these congressmen and where are all these people, and I couldn't find them. And I don't question their patriotism, but there was a lot of people, well, I'll be there if it works out all right. And in the presidency, you can't do that. Hey, sometimes you make a call that people don't like, and sometimes you do what proves to be right, but you have to make the decision yourself.
The presidency, Mike, is a very lonely job and a very heavy one. All throughout the day that the president was here, there was